right, welcome back to Psychedelics today, everybody. Today I'm joined with Dr. Peter Sjöstedt-H. How's it going? Glad to have you back on here.
Yeah, nice to be back on with you, Kyle. Very always happy to speak with you and meet you, as I've actually met you in person now, haven't I?
Last year, yeah, at Claremont. This is kind of an extension of Claremont, our conversation today. So you're helping to organize a conference called the Philosophy of Psychedelics in Exeter University or University of Exeter.
University of Exeter,
yeah. So let's dig in a little bit. What is this conference? Why are you organizing this conference?
Right. So it's, to my knowledge, the first ever Philosophy of Psychedelics conference, or at least the first academic one. It will be held in, then, as you say, University of Exeter between the 17th and 19th of April 2020 this year. And before that, there'll be a holotropic breathwork workshop on campus on the university as well. So how did this all come about? Well, so we met then in Claremont, California in March last year, and there it was a sort of conference based on the work of Alfred North Whitehead, wasn't it? And looking at exceptional experiences. And so going there and meeting again Lenny and Elizabeth Gibson, Dream Shadow, and John Buchanan there, Alice Dommett, Andrew Schwartz, who's director of the Center for Process Studies, which is the main Whitehead center in America, in the world probably actually. But anyway, meeting all these people, we sort of spoke about creating a more specifically philosophical conference, and we thought, well, I thought really about doing it at Exeter, where I'm based, Exeter University, and so that's what started it. Really, it was sort of triggered there, and it's a continuation in a way of that California conference. And then since then, a few months thereafter, we've been organizing this thing. So it's an official University of Exeter event. It's not an external event. Because I work there, and it's, like I say, happening in mid-April. There will be 12 speakers, some really interesting speakers there, and half of the whole conference is going to be discussion. So the talks will be relatively short, like 20 minutes long, and then the afternoons will be taken up by discussion groups, which will be led, chaired, facilitated. And then on the Sunday, there'll be a panel session right at the very end, where we'll sort of be like an epilogue of the whole event. And then following that, there should be a publication with the 12 speakers. There's 12 essays, perhaps a few more as well, coming out. And we're sort of working with the publisher with regards to that at the moment. So it's all pretty exciting. So, and the philosophy, this is called Philosophy of Psychedelics. It was, that was actually my research fellow supervisor, Professor Christine Housekeller, who suggested that name. She's giving a talk herself there, the first talk, in fact. The philosophy, though, is from a wide variety of angles. So it's like her talk will be on kind of Frankfurt School critique of the commodification of psychedelics under capitalist systems. So using people like Foucault and Marcuse, people like that. That's one take on it. There will be analytic philosophers like Ulla from Norway, Ulla Martin Moen, who's giving a talk on the sort of the benefits, the sort of epistemic benefits of psychedelics against people who say they just cause hallucination and so on. There'll be Matthew Segal from California. He's giving a talk on our ordinary perception being the hallucination. I'm really making this much more basic than it will be, but just quickly. And I'm giving a talk myself on Spinoza. I'm looking into the metaphysics. I'm looking at Spinoza and the unitive experience, according to Spinoza's notion of intuition, or the peak of that being the so-called intellectual love of God. Even though he's a sort of atheist, nature and God is the same for him. And there'll be a number of other interesting talks. I've just spoken to the great philosopher of science, sociologist Andrew Pickering, who's a retired professor at Exeter now, but he's probably actually going to give a talk now as well. He's a sort of he's one of the sort of main voices on something called cybernetics.
Mm. Oh,
He'll,
cool.
he'll hopefully be giving a talk on psychedelics and cybernetics. That's not 100% confirmed, but it's pretty likely. So and many other interesting talks. I mean, on the website philosophyofpsychedelics.com, you can see all those abstracts in full and biographies of each of the speakers. And on top of the speakers, we've got some really interesting people coming. And I don't just mean you and Joe, because you and Joe, of course, will be facilitators there. We've also got the psychologist Sue Blackmore coming. So she won't be talking as a talk as such, but she'll be in the discussion group. So we've got Swedish futurist philosopher and pop star and pop idol judge Alexander Bard coming, Swedish comedian Aaron Flam coming. We've got Matthew Clark coming, who's a doctor at SOAS, and he's written a book about ayahuasca and science used therein and so on. So really a number of other people, maybe I shouldn't mention, but like a really interesting selection of people from all kinds of angles, but but it's all kind of academic, serious angle at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of subtitle of the conference is Exploring Frameworks for Experience. So that ties it into California, but also it's ultimately an exploration, because still at this stage, people don't really know what to make of these things, psychedelics.
Right. Yeah, I'm really excited about this. And I was gonna ask you, it sounds like one of the first philosophy-oriented conferences that I've heard of. I mean, and there's been philosophy tracks on psychedelics at conferences, but I haven't really stumbled across a conference dedicated to the philosophy of psychedelics. So this is really exciting.
Yeah, no, this is, I believe it's the first. I'm sure someone will say actually in 1969 there was
Right.
But to my knowledge, and I've looked into it, this is the first one yet. Why? Well, because there are philosophy tracks like at Breaking Convention. I mean, I chaired one myself once, gave a talk at one once, but or several in fact, but there's never dedication, which means that if you get too deeply into the philosophy, you'll lose people who are like experts in other fields, psychology or neuroscience, whatever it may be. So it's kind of nice to get a selection of philosophers who sort of share the same kind of vocabulary and so on, same interests together to get into more depth here. And hopefully it will be the beginning of a series of conferences. That's my hope. Like I say, a great book of these talks will come out afterwards. And I mean, ultimately, we're even looking to set up a psychedelic hub at the University of Exeter.
Oh, awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, this again is in the pipeline, so it's not for sure, but there are, as you know, psychedelic hubs in universities, like, for example, Imperial and Johns Hopkins and so on. And that is always solely to do with the neuroscience and its medicinal ramifications, right? But there are no hubs on social science, the politics of these things, engaged ethical questions relating to them and metaphysical questions, phenomenological questions and so on. There are no hubs devoted to that. So it would be lovely. But there are many people who would love to study it. I mean, the number of people have emailed me saying, I'm looking to do a PhD or a master's in some psychedelics and philosophy or whatever. I mean, there's a huge demand for it now because, we've had decades, if not centuries, if not millennia really, but since the 20th century, we've had decades of thought on psychedelics from so many different perspectives that it's, we can be broad all the time and talk about these general remarks, but it's nice to get into the details as well and apply like critical theory or whatever it may be, Husserlian phenomenology in its strict sense to these things to see if they can complement philosophy and if philosophy can complement the psychedelic experience itself. I mean, there's so much to be explored. The one thing I do all the time is to look at, well, what would like Whitehead make of the psychedelic experience? What would Davy? What would Bergson, Schopenhauer, and now Spinoza? I'm looking at, how could we understand what's this crazy stuff that's going on under these lenses, you know. So and also now, because psychedelics, because the whole political scene's different from the mid 20th century, and because there's now like conferences on investment in psychedelics and so on, you know, even, right? And because it seems that prohibition now is giving place to assimilation into the social orders already present, that sort of that begs for a social analysis, you know. And there are a lot of thinkers that can be drawn upon, and schools of thought that can be drawn upon with regard to that. I mean, this investment phase is just beginning, of course, but as a result, it needs perhaps critiques, you know, so that
yeah,
don't focus on, you know, on one system. I mean, one thing that, for example, Mark Hughes has said was that the great benefit of psychedelics is that they make you question the social order, right? And now it seems like social order is assimilating them in order to fortify that order, right? So that's an interesting change in itself. How do we deal with that? What can be made of that? How would that affect policy in future and so on? So lots to be said and lots to be done. And this conference is the beginning. Well, not the beginning, but it's a chain in that quest.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And yeah, just kind of critiquing the system there. I think you know, it's been a huge topic recently. Joe and I have been touching on it a little bit, just because it keeps coming up, obviously, because new things develop every day. So I'm excited to just even explore that and learn about other people's beliefs and thoughts around, you know, this kind of emerging field, because it seems really chaotic at times, right? You're like, whoa, what's going on here?
I mean,
but it's exciting too.
It is exciting, but the ethics is really interesting because it seems paradoxical. Like, in one sense, then we've got sort of we want to stop the people going to prison for taking plants, you know, or fungi. And you know, you look at the prohibition history, you see it's like related to slavery and, you know, all kinds of pseudoscience and so on. At the same time, the corporatization of it also doesn't seem ethically palatable, right? So whereas, is there a median, or, you know, like focusing on one as opposed to the other, we go terribly, you know, astray. So yeah, no, but like I said, that's Christine Hauskeller who's going to focus on that primarily. My talk's on, like I say, Spinoza, but also Spinoza was a kind of meta-ethicist like Nietzsche in a way. He spoke about good and evil not being absolute, but being part of one's culture. And so the interesting thing that psychedelics can do is that they can raise you out of that culture and see your beliefs as an objective thing down below, as it were. And that makes you sort of open your mind to new possibilities and so on. This is related to the whole ethical question, of course, you know. Another interesting thing I found, that it used to be the case that, you know, when thinkers spoke about mysticism, and I consider mysticism to be a subset of the psychedelic experience. It's not the whole thing is much more than that. But one subset is, you know, mysticism. And when people spoke about mysticism before, there was a huge emphasis on that mystical experiences went beyond good and evil. And this is kind of lost today. And it seems that there's a kind of there's one ethical stance taken for granted. You know, in other words, it's not questioned. And then things are being valued according to that standard, you know. But the interesting thing about psychedelics is they can make one question that standard, or at least they can for some people. So that kind of phenomenology is linked ultimately to the ethics, which is linked to the politics, which is linked to law, of course. Yeah, so that's another aspect that we'll be looking at in the conference. There's also, I should say, stuff, you know, other related things, like Steve Odin from Hawaii University is giving what looks like a fascinating talk on psychedelic experience in relation to Zen. We've got Michael Halewood from the University of Essex, who's a great Whitehead scholar, speaking about psychedelics and Whitehead's philosophy. Lindsay Jordan's giving a skeptical talk as to whether psychedelics really can contribute to philosophy. They can, she says, the abstract, they can contribute to the interest philosophical interest, but they can't actually change philosophy themselves. This is, for example, in contradistinction to Patrick Lundborg, who wrote the great book on psychedelics. He was based in Stockholm, Sweden. We've got Joanna Supanen speaking about Jung. I mean, this is, you know, sort of philosophical angle on Jung. We've got Talene Artinian speaking about gratitude. We've got Peter Lemmens from Radboud University in the Netherlands coming over to speak about ayahuasca. Michelle Weber speaking, sort of using psychedelics to criticize Western philosophy of mind and how it hasn't really taken in all of that which could be experienced. Yeah, so really looking forward to it. And everything seems to be in place. I should say that unfortunately the tickets, the 50 tickets for sale, and they sold out within a few weeks, like really quickly. So it shows the interest is there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's pretty amazing. And I mean, we didn't even advertise it really, just a little few posts on social media, and that was it. But then again, we did get affiliation with some good large reach groups. So Breaking Convention, then David Luke of Breaking Convention will be a facilitator there. Shakruna Bialabet came to us, asked for affiliation. We also affiliated now with the Center for Consciousness Studies on the University of Arizona, and they're the ones who do the conference, you know, towards the science of consciousness, or
cool.
just called Science of Consciousness now, with you know, like chaired by David Chalmers, Stuart Hameroff, and a few others. You know, so there's a wide-ranging interest, and that's why. And there's a waiting list, I should say. If you want to be on the waiting list, it's just send an email, the subject line waiting list, to info@philosophyyofpsychedelics.com. But yeah, no, it just shows that there's a massive interest there. So instead of like getting a new venue for the conference, we've got an amazing Reed Hall on campus in Exeter, like an old mansion, really. It looks like a haunted house.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, anyway, instead of having a bigger venue, we'll have hopefully further conferences in the future. So make it a continuing thing, like many conferences are these days, you know.
And I know we'll be there kind of, you know, recording some things on the back end, but do you plan on I know there's not going to be any formal talks, but do you have any plans to record the formal part of it? Because this is kind of a mixed type of conference, right? There's going to be some presentations, but then open discussion. So it's not a typical conference format.
No, it's like a big emphasis on discussion.
Yeah.
There will be then, so we will hope to film film the 12 main talks, but they're only 20 minutes each. We'll film those. I don't think we'll film the discussions because number one, we'd have to get everyone's permission. Number two, you know, you might put people off speaking freely if it's all filmed, you know. Maybe we'll record it audio only because then people won't be able to identify voices, you know. But I don't think we'll film it.
And do you plan on putting the video up online for folks that are interested in hearing those 20-minute talks down the line?
Yeah, we will eventually.
Cool.
Yeah, that's the plan. Awesome. And like I said, also a book. So each talk will be hopefully developed into an essay, and those will be chapters and book in an anthology book, which I will help edit.
Super exciting. And what about Breathwork? Are there any spots open for the Breathwork for the folks in the UK that might want to just travel over there for the day?
Yeah, so the Breathwork is happening a few days before and sort of touching the conference. There are places available still, I believe. It's on campus, and people can stay in Holland Hall, like the people who will stay at the conference. The workshop is then organized by the Gibsons, whom you know very well, Lenny and Elizabeth Gibson mostly. It's, for those of you who don't know, it's I mean, I've never done it and I'm looking forward to it myself. But from what I understand, it's a method developed by Stan Grof, the great Czech psychiatrist. And it's a method of, well, I think you know much more than I do, but correct me if I'm wrong, it's a method of breathing, fundamentally breathing a certain way, which can make emerge novel experience, exceptional experiences, perhaps akin to psychedelics, perhaps different therefrom. But that, anyway, like I said, I've never actually tried it. I'm very excited to. But that is happening on the Tuesday evening, the Wednesday full day, and then Thursday morning it's finishing off. And on Thursday evening, there's a drinks reception for the speakers and facilitators. And on Friday, the conference really kicks off. So there are places left, I believe, for the workshop, but not the conference. But there might be cancellations for the conference, so possibilities still there.
Yeah, so that's definitely a good reminder to join the wait list in case there are some cancellations. Maybe you can squeeze in if there's been a few cancellations happening.
Could happen, yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of emails begging me if they could be volunteers, but can't. After the 20th one, I just can't. There are so many.
Well, hopefully this is the first of many, right?
Yes.
So
I
know Lenny was talking about he would love to have an annual conference about philosophy of psychedelics. So, hopefully this just really boosts some interest and really kicks things off.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it will. So you can keep all the latest, there's a Facebook group for it, Facebook page, as it were, like Philosophy of Psychedelics, and then there's the website itself, so you can stay in touch by looking at that website. Again, it's philosophyofpsychedelics.com.
Cool. Well, Peter, I know that you have to get running soon, so maybe this is a good place to stop.
Yeah.
Again, people can check out the conference and learn more at philosophyofpsychedelics.com. And anything else you want to close with?
Not really. Just stay tuned, and there is more to come.
Awesome. Well, I'm super pumped about it and excited to report what happens as well to the folks listening to our show. So,
great.
Well, thanks so much for coming on and telling us about the conference, and looking forward to it.
Looking forward to see you.